This week's scenario is Recon from the 2016 Steamroller packet. This scenario does not have the killbox artifact and consists of a single zone which can be controlled for 1 CP or dominated for 2 CPs after the enemy objective has been destroyed or removed from play for 1 CP. There are also 2 flags in the scenario. Each can be dominated for 1 CP. Victory condition consists of 5 control points or caster assassination.
Hello, this is Iron Lich W, and this week I decided to bring out Lord Exhumator Scaverous, along with a few heavies, the usual full boat of Satyxis. Basically what I'm looking to do is get a spell assassination or win on scenario of this list.
Hello everyone, this is Gaston, and today we're playing Helga the Conquerer in the Thornfall Alliance theme list. I find that the combined arms nature that Helga encourages you to play meshes well with the combined arms benefits that the theme force grants you. So there's a lot of infantry here, and they're supporting a good number of war beasts as well.
For deployment with the Cryx, I start by putting Scaverous behind the near obstacle I plan to hide him behind the whole game, with some of his jacks near him. Then I put the Satyxis on the right, on my right side, that way, because I know they have the speed to get around the obstacle and the ability to gain Pathfinder, so they'll be able to stop my opponent from controlling that flag. And I put the Satyxis Blood, which is on the left, to stop my opponent from going after that flag.
So when building Helga lists, I have a lot of problems with her that I can't really nail down. It doesn't seem to necessarily click. So I went back and I looked through all my old games with her, and I found that the games that I won is when I assassinated with Helga. So when I set out to design this list, I set out to build a list that Plan A is to do the Helga feat assassination, and then Plan B is to actually focus down on the attrition. So in that vein, I wanted to include a lot of guns. Helga goes forward, she knocks down your opponent's warcaster, and then you have all these gunshots to follow it up and get the kill. So because of that, I have the Brigands, and because I'm taking all the Brigands is when I decided to go into the theme force. That also gets me the free Efaarit, as well as the ambushing Commandos.
So for Cryx turn 1, I think about how I want to allocate my focus, how I want to impact my army. First thing I know I want to do is get a Deathripper out there early. He's going to be my sacrificial one early on. And then get Erebus into a position to where he projects the most threat. If I do a simple TK, gets him past the obstacle, he can charge. And then I just go ahead and run out my Blood Witches. I want to kind of run as far as I can, at least get the Blood Witch as far as I can off the board, that way she shuts off tough from my opponent's Brigands. Then I go ahead and run the Raiders as far as they can. The Raiders are the only unit to run their absolute max distance because I need them to get around that obstruction. And if my plan goes off accordingly, I'll be able to take out the Warlord that's giving my opponent's red Brigand unit Prey. Prey kind of has me hesitant on using my Raiders, but I mean, they're there to sacrifice, so out they go. Then I go ahead and throw at least 2 of my heavy jacks into the middle so that they can work on the zone. And advance the rest of the army support forward. Like, I've played Helga once or twice from Gaston, so I have a basic idea of what he's going to try and do. I just need to be smart enough to be aware and not fall for the tricks. So I throw out Death Ward on Erebus since he's the furthest jack forward, and throw out Soul Harvester for the next turn.
So one of the compromises I made when building this list that I feel is an important one is rather than the Warhogs, I'd really like to have Roadhogs. They're faster, they have their own guns, which kind of fits into my primary plan, but I ended up having to drop them because of points because I really wanted to fix Saxon Orrik into here. And what Saxon Orrik lets me do is have Helga do things like camp behind a wall, move through the rough terrain, the water that's in the middle of the table, it's a acidic pool, because we're playing with special terrain now. So that's kind of a compromise, and I've since retooled the list a little bit. So what we're doing here is Helga's coming forward, she's putting Defender's Ward on herself, she's going to put up Dash, so that way things can move forward a little bit faster. I'm being very conservative with how far forward I move, which maybe I should be more aggressive with that, and I'm thinking maybe run more further up in turn 1 as I, practice this list. But for the most part, we're playing it safe, being very respectful of his threat ranges. We've got the Brigands moving up under dash. They're able to advance 6 inches and dig in or reform, but in this case they're going to go ahead and dig in. One of the things to be very careful about when you're playing Scaverous in particular is he is very, very, very good at casting telekinesis. You have all the cheap arc nodes, you have his feet, and so he's able to manipulate a lot of the positioning that I'd really rather him not be able to manipulate. Since the primary goal of this list is to assassinate, with Helga I want her to be playing for, I want her to be bullying my opponent because she has that 17-inch threat. When he has things like, is it a Reaper and telekinesis in play, now he's got, you can walk forward 6 inches, you've got the 8-inch gun, then you've got double TKs thanks to the cheap arc nodes. That's going to flip Helga around, that's going to take away her set defense, that's going to take away her shield, and a lot of her defensive bonuses.
Cryx turn 2. So, with how my opponent unpacked his army, I'm getting the look that I want. I am really plotting how I'm going to go after the Brigand unit on my opponent's left. My main objective is to knock off prey from the Raiders, that way the Raiders can run full steam into my opponent's line and jam them. I know he wants to use his Brigands for shooting, I want to shut off his ability to use them for shooting. So I run the Seether out of there to really get out of the way of the other arc node that was in a better spot than the one I intended to sacrifice. He runs up his full distance, make sure I got range to the Brigand, make sure I know where I need to put my caster so he's in range to arc. And then I'm just plotting what I want to do with the rest of my army. I figure most of my army is going to have to endure one round of shooting, so I'm going to try and keep him, at least give my opponent threat saturation so he doesn't concentrate on too many key pieces. One thing I want to do though is keep my caster behind that linear obstacle so he gets some kind of cover. I know I don't want to advance him too far, so where he is now is about as far as I want him to be. Maybe a little out there to get to the zone. And I do cast Soul Harvester through the arc node. Unfortunately, I needed a 9 to hit and I rolled an 8, so it deviates. And this is the guy that I wanted to hurt the most. But such is the way of life. In fact, I'm not surprised. That normally happens to me when I actually need something to hit. But rolling random dice on blast damage, and behold, I hit a hard 11 on 2 dice. But going off the show, I go ahead and run out some Blood Witches. Since I know I want Erebus to survive or not take any shots on the left, I throw out enough of my Blood Witches so I'm willing to sacrifice a little more than half the unit. As long as I have the Blood Hag around, Erebus will be able to use his overtake ability and send souls to Scaverous, and he'll be living the high life on all those souls. I decide, even with prey, to go ahead and advance my raiders anyway. I know if I do not advance my raiders, then I'm really giving my opponent the opportunity to get into the zone and really shut down my ability to win on scenario. And I just go ahead and move the rest of my support pieces up.
So this turn we're going to go ahead and have the Commandos ambush in from the top flank. Unfortunately for me, they are going to be pretty much out of range to threaten anything this turn, but one of the reasons that I like having them in this list, one of the reasons I like having them in my Midas list, is that for lists that are very based around kind of assassinating your opponent's Warcaster, it's really nice to have something that adds pressure on them to move. Because what a lot of people do, is you can see I'm doing with Helga, he's doing with Scaverous, is that they like to kind of bunker up with their Warlock, their Warcaster. And so, to be able to make them uncomfortable where they're at, and to get them to move to somewhere that's more advantageous for me in the following turns, is actually kind of a huge boon, even if I'm not getting any direct benefit out of them this particular turn. They're just kind of running into position. So the other thing that I'm going to start checking for here is, remember I said my primary win condition is assassination. I'm going to start looking for opportunities to pull that off. And if you're not familiar with the Helga assassination, basically she starts at speed 5, she casts dash on herself, and then she charges for 9 inches, then she can cyclone for another 6, so you're up to 15, then she's got reach for 17 inches, she'll feat and slam whatever she hits. The reason why you do it in that order is so that you can redirect your successful charge attack after you take your cyclone swing, so that way you get 2 attacks instead of just the 1. But you can certainly, if you need to, cyclone then charge. That's obviously not a problem. So here, remember last turn I had said that I didn't move up as aggressively. What I'm looking at is that I can actually get Helga onto his little arc node and slam him into Scaverous. The problem with that is when I measured all my other ranges, I don't have any of the guns to follow it up. So I would probably be able to knock him down, but then I wouldn't be able to do anything past that, which is an issue. So because I was too timid, the assassination is basically off the table for this turn, and we're going to go down into our attrition game. So what we've got going on right now is that the bottom unit of Brigands had prayed the Raiders, so they're kind of aiming, and even with the anti-shooting bubble that the Raiders have up, I mean, that puts the Brigands up at Rat 9, which is pretty reasonable. And the ones, so you got the front rank, they're shooting into the Raiders, then you have the back rank who didn't have range on the Raiders, aiming and shooting into the little arc node. So his armor is pretty soft, and so even, if a couple of them miss, enough of them are going to hit, and he has a few enough boxes where once the movement's gone, that guy's really easy to take out, and they successfully kill a bunch of Raiders. Well, they successfully kill a handful of Raiders and the little arc node, so that's a pretty good turn for these guys. What I'm going to try to do here with my repositions is make 2 lines of the Brigands, so to speak, where you've got a front line that kind of accepts the Raider charge, and that'll be less models than the ones I'm holding in the rear. And the other thing I'm trying to do is keep the Warlord back a little bit to keep him safe from getting sniped out. And the idea behind that is, you're going to sacrifice a few of them, it's inevitable, but the rest of them will be able to countercharge very effectively. The other thing that I'm looking to do is leave gaps for the Efaarit to move in and out of that unit. So they're going to start moving up, and they're going to start trying to target the Reaper and remove his drag arm. And the idea behind, targeting the Reaper, targeting the Arc Nodes, those are my priorities, because every one of those tools that I eliminate from my opponent's arsenal further reduces his options. And one of the things with Scaverous that's very terrifying is how good he is at telekinesis. His feat supports it very well. And so I want to, and when you also flip Helga, she loses a lot of her defensive ability. She loses set defense, she loses a shield. So you don't want that to happen, so you have to be very respectful of what he does and take out these options and these tools. So the Efaarit both move up, they do successfully hit, but I think between the two of them they only roll like 5 damage total. So unfortunately the Reaper arm is very alive and well, which is kind of sad for me. So we're just gonna keep pounding on him a little bit here. The upper unit of Brigands, the Blue Brigands, have actually prayed the Reaper. And then one of the things that they're also going to do is we're going to start working on these Blood Witches here. So they're going to move up, a fair amount of them are going to move up so that they're just in range because the Blood Witches do have stealth. And we're going to work on that front line of Blood Witches again. And then we're going to have a few of the Brigands also go ahead and shoot up the Reaper. Just trying to, take him out of the game. And if I can get a whole heavy rather than just the arm, that's also awesome for me. The other thing I was paying attention to in his list is he lacks a mechanic. So there is no repairing this guy once systems do start going down. So thanks to the power of pre-measuring, just moving up to get that front line in. And even though, you come in, you get your 5 inches, and then you reform back 3, it leaves you an 8-inch gap, they're still going to be able to get to that front line with their front line, but then maybe there's enough distance between your front line and their second line if you successfully kill those 3 models where they can't get to. So you're able to start sandpapering down, you're able to get things for free in a way where it doesn't cost you models to kill his. So they're going through their shooting. Unfortunately, they're not rolling particularly well against the Witches, even though the Witches' defense isn't that bad. I still need 8s, I believe. So that only one of them goes down, which is unfortunate for me. And then we put another couple shots into the Reaper, and I think one of the guys was out of range of the Reaper, so he tries to put a shot into the Arc Node. And they just land some more damage. So they're going to start repositioning as well, and they're going to have a couple guys in the zone, and they're going to do that same thing where we're going to back up a little bit, leave some gaps for the Razorback crews to move through, and then we're also going to make sure we contest the zone and then try to get away from his second line of attack. Unfortunately, since I didn't manage to kill the first line, the rest of that strategy doesn't go as hoped, but what can you do? This is also one of those times where I went back, I would watch this game, and I'm like, I really need to change out the Warhogs for Roadhogs, because at this point in the game, they're not contributing anything. They're 30 points that's not contributing to my army, and that's pretty unfortunate for me. That was one of the things that pushed that list change as I go back and learn from this game. So just making sure everybody's in command, it's always very important. So next up we're going to go with the Razorback crews. What I've discovered with playing these guys is that they're a lot harder to use than you initially expect. You know, I mean, you don't really think a pig with a gun is all that difficult to use. But that Rat 4, if you don't have a way of doing anything to it, can be absolutely crippling. Imagine, you know, defense 12 is not particularly high, and that Rat 4 still needs an 8 to hit. And if you want to maximize your benefits from that model, you need to directly hit. So going back and, you know, after playing a few games, you really need to focus on unpacking the army well, and getting them up a lot further on turn 1, so that way they can aim and scoot rather than move and shoot, if that makes sense, because they have the reposition as well. So what we're doing now is Helga's actually going to move on up, and she's going to take a fully boosted shot with her gun. Her gun's quite nice, it's POW 13. And then she's going to cyclone back to safety. And, you know, as I made the changes to get the Roadhogs in, one of the things I eliminated was the Bone Grinders to free up the points. And it got a little bit weird with the free points from the Theme Force. So that essentially takes distraction off the table, and, you know, distraction's a very good spell, but it's a very Fury cost intensive spell to cast because you're going to need to boost. So, you know, it takes that spell off the table to remove the Bone Grinders, but you get your gun back. So there's a little give and take there. So up there we have the Commandos. They're just kind of running. We're making sure that they stay in everybody's back arc. And then we're making sure that next turn they are going to have some serious back arc lines to Scaverous. And my idea there is just make my opponent uncomfortable. I don't want him getting too happy with facing off against me. And I'm looking for him to push him into some area where I can either get Helga to slam a model into him, or slam him himself in the next turn. So we're trying to look towards the future with these moves.
Cryx turn 3. So my opponent brought out his Commandos, which doesn't surprise me, and they went probably where I'm not surprised they went, on my left side, because I wasn't giving my opponent any opportunity on my right flank. However, the stats of the Commandos are apparently not that great, but they're there mostly for when my caster gets knocked down, or anything, my controller gets knocked down. And then their little grenade sacks become a little more deadly. So I am looking at how my opponent has not necessarily committed a whole lot to the zone. So I'm thinking now's the turn, the right time to really get into the zone. He's only got 3 models in there. So if I could take out his objective, I'll be able to take out the Efaarit Scout and the 2 Brigands that are in my opponent's zone, giving me 3 points. Trying to gauge all my threat ranges. Seether's not necessarily far enough to be in a spot where I'm comfortable. So I go ahead and advance without allocating focus out. Advance a Reaper to a good spot, because I'm going to drag that Efaarit Scout out from where he is to where something can kill it. So I use the one focus he's got that he gets allocated naturally to boost the hit. I hit the Efaarit Scout and I do a couple points of damage, and I drag him in and attempt to finish him with melee. And I say attempt because my Reaper is not that great at life. That's okay, I'm in a spot where I can, the rest of my army can do some damage now. So now that I got space cleared out from that objective, go ahead and send in my Raider Captain. Since she's still a Weapon Master, unlike the rest of the witches who no longer have a Power Swale, she does some good damage to it and softens it up. I'm hoping to the point of where the 2 or 3 raiders that are close by can finish the job. But my captain now has fire because of field catch and corrosion because I ran through the acid pit. But on Cryx, I don't care about them as long as I win in the end. So I got a good amount of damage on the objective, and I'm looking at the 2 remaining Brigands. So I move my caster over a little bit, then move him up. Given where the Commandos are, I think I'm just going to switch them to the other side of the objective. So I go out and throw out Soul Harvester on to the Blood Witches, and then I go ahead and launch a Beast of Worms at the 2 remaining Brigands. Actually target one that's next to them. What I want to do is I want to get one of the Brigands out of the way, that way I can try and get the gang for the Blood Witches on the 2 that are in the zone. So we get it measured. It's determined that it's in. I hit. Unfortunately, he's far enough away to where I didn't hit anything else. But I got him out of the way, which is good. And now Scaverous is going to go to town and get some souls. So now everything is up to the raiders, who do True Path to negate the terrain. And they take the order to charge. So I send in a couple raiders, or a few raiders, from the very far side of the board. And I put the rest on the Efaarit Scout that the Reaper failed to kill. And I tie up some additional Brigands. So one thing I'm doing here is I'm hoping that I put enough pressure on my opponent to really keep him on his back foot. So the raiders, who do a pretty good job of hitting the Brigands, and my opponent doing a pretty good job of not passing a tough check, thank you Gaston, they kill all the Brigands that they actually charged. And Scaverous can feel his soul cage is just filling up. I even managed to kill the Efaarit Scout. So now comes time for the kind of the main course of their activation, which is the damage that they put on to the objective. I do realize I have quite a few raiders lit on fire after I'm done attacking, such as the cost of business. So I knock out my opponent's objective. Now I just have 2 measly little Brigands left. I believe that the Blood Witches can do it, but just continue my onslaught. I advance up to Seether, make sure that he's got a clear line of sight to anything that can get within countercharge range. I move up to Deathripper. Then I go to town. I move my Skarlock Thrall, who's gonna cast Telekinesis. Or not Telekinesis, but Excarnate. I figure he didn't have much to do with his activation, so he goes up and kills the Brigand that toughed the Feast of Worms. Now he's out of the way. I have room to really throw my raiders in there and to get 3 more control points. Or get 2 more control points, equating to 3 on the turn. My opponent doesn't want to move up Helga yet, which is fine with me. Because I'm thinking next turn, when all these souls turn to focus, it'll be feet turn. So I have to be kind of planning ahead, and then throw just onslaught my army out there. Because what I'm planning to do with Scaverous on next turn is my opponent throws anything into the zone, Scaverous should be close enough to where he can feed and TK out of the zone, giving me a second turn of dominating the zone and allowing me to win on 5 control points. Anyhow, now that I've placed all the raiders, or not raiders, but blood witches, I put them to work. And I go and I continue killing the Brigands that are in the zone. I managed to kill them both. The raiders, I use the ability to go incorporeal when they kill, so that my opponent has to throw extra resources into killing them. I pile up Scaverous' souls, I throw Erebus into the mix, and I end my turn, giving me 3 control points.
Unfortunately for me, my opponent is putting me in a bit of a difficult spot here, because he's up ahead 3 points on scenario, and realistically, I don't think I can actually successfully contest this long enough to attrition him down at this point. I think I have the models and the firepower to attrition him, but I think he'll win on scenario before I'm able to successfully do things. So that's again pushing me back towards assassination, which happily for me is plan A. The other thing that's pretty happy for me is that those commandos made him uncomfortable enough and Scaverous moved himself around enough that I'm now in threat range to kill him with Helga. The other thing is I didn't move my guns up as far as I probably should have. Again, I was a little bit too timid, but it was far enough to actually be able to apply firepower now after the fact. So there's a couple things that need to happen. I need to clear off some infantry, and what Helga's going to end up doing is we're going to pre-measure the whole thing to make sure it's good to go. But she's going to end up charging some incorporeal models, cycloning straight through them, because that's awesome that you can do that, and then going for the Scaverous kill that way. So in that vein, we have this acid pool in the middle of our table, and that's where, you know, I had made the sacrifices to get him, to get Saxon Orrik into the list to grant Helga Pathfinder. Well, that's about to pay huge dividends right now, because without having that access to Pathfinder on her in this list, this assassination run would not be possible, and you'd probably see me losing pretty badly on scenario at the end of next turn. So it's a worthy sacrifice if you're, you know, in my playtest games he comes into play about half to 2/3 of the time, so it's kind of, you know, your list building decision on whether or not you want him. What we have going on right now is I went ahead and did the Berserk and Overtake on the Battle Boar, and he primaled himself. So he took a free strike so he could walk into the back arc of some models. I'm sorry, he did not primal himself, he just did Berserk and Overtake. So he took a free strike, walked into the back arc, and now is Berserk and Overtaking through all of these Blood Witches, so that way I can clear out room for my Brigands to move. And then they're going to be able to move up into that space that was previously occupied and shoot Scaverous once I knock him down. I had the Warhog come up, and he killed one of the other witches or raiders who was in Helga's way. So now we've got Saxon, he's going to Pathfinder Helga, and then we are going to begin this final countdown. So there's my maximum reach proxy base, and now I'm measuring my distances. So Helga is going to go ahead, she's going to put dash on herself. We're going to use another proxy base to represent her initial charge. So she's going to go towards the Blood Witches first, and then she's going to cyclone the 6 inches up to Scaverous. When she feats and takes her swings, she's going to end up slamming him directly back into the objective, which happily for me, since it's a larger base than him, is actually going to auto boost my damage rolls. So I don't particularly need the charge bonus. I wouldn't get it because it's a redirect. I am boosting the to hit roll just to make sure I have the 2 fury left over. And then she's going to go ahead. She does hit him with her cyclone. She also takes out the Skarlock with her cyclone, and I get a little bit greedy, but she's not in range to actually slam the Reaper. But we called a judge over, and you know, if you're going to cyclone things, you kind of want to cyclone more. So she's going ahead, she knocks him down, and then he's going to use some focus to cancel out too much of the damage. And that'll be the end of Helga's activation. This is one of those things where, you know, you're going for the assassination, you got to be prepared to see it through, because where she's at right now, there's no going back. So next up we have the blue Brigands. They have dash on them, so they're going to be able to advance 6 inches. At least half of them, well, the front line will be able to. And so, unfortunately, they don't have the prey on Scaverous. I kind of looked at what it would take to try to kill the Reaper so I could move prey over, and it's just better to take the POW 12 shots. One of the reasons I specifically like the Brigands is because they are base POW 12, and at least in my opinion, the difference between 10 and 12 is a very significant difference when it comes to ranged firepower. So they're going to go through. It's kind of a shooting gallery at this point. I think one of them actually does roll snake eyes, which is kind of amusing. And another one didn't have range on Scaverous, so he went ahead and took a shot on the Reaper. So they got him down to just a couple of health. And this is where I have my Razorback crews. Now that he's knocked down, they're at 4 is not such a big deal, and they're going to be able to do some follow-up as well. So I'm just checking to see who else can shoot what, but realistically everything's either engaged or stealth or incorporeal. The other nice thing about having the Brigands in this list is after they come up and do their shooting, they can reposition 3 out of the way or to open up line of sight for your other models. So then we have our Razorback crew, and he's going to come on up, pop a rocket into Scaverous, and finish the game for us. Thank you all for watching.
So for afterthoughts, there are a couple of things that I could have done better. My opponent got off the one thing I knew he had to get off in order to kill, because I knew he was going to have to knock me down in order to kill me, because pigs don't have that great a rat. So what I could have done is, instead of going incorporeal, because my opponent's able to walk through him, and the new errata from Mark III says incorporeal models cannot make free strikes, I probably should have done smoke. No, not smoke, but the blood mist. Create the clouds to give my opponent line of sight issues. Give him something extra to deal with. Line of sight as well as the physical model themselves. Second thing that comes to mind is when I move the Skarlock up in order to cast Excarnate. What I was thinking of doing with the Skarlock was casting Telekinesis on my caster. If I had done that, I would have been able to move my caster a couple inches further away from where Helga was, because I was trying to move him to the other side of my objective. And that would have been out of reach of my opponent, because when we measured it, he was just in. That was probably the two largest ones, as the Commandos weren't a huge threat because they had to deal with rough terrain, and they weren't very accurate. So if I don't get knocked down, I don't place myself in front of my own objective to get that extra die on the damage roll, my caster has a reasonable chance of living. Of course, then, maybe not. I might be kidding myself. I knew what my opponent was going to try and do. I knew my opponent's win condition, and I did not do enough to deny him that win condition. Better luck next time.